Mark?
Here.
Chris? Sherelle?
Here.
Dan?
Dan, can you hear us? All right, he'll jump on.
Barry?
Here.
Louise?
No, I mean, it said you're muted. You're asked to be unmuted. Press *6, which I did. And it
Adam?
said, you are unmuted,
Here.
but I don't hear a doggone thing.
Shane?
Here.
Tate?
Here. We do have a quorum. We'll proceed. First item on the agenda is the minutes from the September 16th meeting.
Hello.
What's that?
Hello.
Dan, can you hear us? Dan?
Time is it on your phone? Answer.
Okay, now Dan, can you hear us?
Hang on.
Are you there now?
Yep, wait, can you hear us?
Yeah. Can
Yep.
now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have the minutes in front of us. What are the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. First item on the agenda is the request from Taylor Oxendahl for a variance to remain in agricultural zoning district for a proposed 20-acre parcel. Okay, Sam?
Good evening, Commissioners. Sam Miller with County Planning. So the applicant, Taylor, Ed is acting on his behalf as the applicant, but they're proposing a re-subdivision. The re-subdivision is included in your packet. It's proposing the creation of 3 new parcels. One is actually existing. They're just kind of rearranging this. And these new parcels will be created for non-residential purposes. The remainder parcel will be about 123 acres, so that'll be remaining in the agricultural zoning district just by default. But this newly created parcel is about 20 acres. The applicant has stated that they're not going to use it for residential purposes. And in all honesty, the terrain out there is so rough, you really couldn't put a house out there. So they're just going to use it for their own personal purposes. And the applicant's here if you want to ask him more specific questions about that. Planning and zoning just had 2 comments, recordation of the re-subdivision, and then the second comment, which is also noted on the plat, that if this newly created 20-acre parcel were to ever be developed, so that means any types of structure that where they would need to pull a permit from the building department, they would have to create legal and physical access. So they have legal access because it's a section line, but there is not physical access up to this newly created parcel. And so they would have to build a road. But like I stated before, the applicant has said he doesn't have plans to put any residential or really any structures that would require him to pull a building permit currently or in the near future. So if you have any questions for me, I'm here, and then the applicant, both Taylor and Ed are in the audience.
Okay, do you guys have any questions for Sam at this time? Okay, I'll open up the hearing. Do you wish to add anything, or?
Sure. Do I need to come up to the mic?
Yep, please, yeah, because it's being recorded. State your name.
Sure. I'm Taylor Oxendahl. Never been to one of these things before, so I didn't know what the protocol is. But so really, we're just looking at buying this for hunting property is all. What kind of precipitated all this was last year, my wife and I. So my dad actually owns the 25 acres that butts up against it. And so my wife and I were sitting in a deer blind last year and had a truck come up on top of the hill right above us, actually right above the 20-acre parcel that we're wanting to purchase right now from the Slomet family. And and guy parked up on top of the hill and right in line of sight of our blind. So I got out of the blind to just go walk up there and talk to the guy. And of course, as soon as I go out, he hops in the truck, turns around, and drives out of there. So kind of said phooey on that, whatever. Next day, I go out there about noon, and what do you know? I'm coming up down the section line, and I see same truck parked in the same spot, and I see two blaze orange vests walking down, actually trying to walk up the hill. Look like they're dragging something. So go cruise down to the farmyard, go walk out there, and sure enough, they're dragging two young muley bucks out of there, and which they had legal, every legal right to hunt back there. It's not posted land or anything. But the problem we had with it was they're within 100 yards of our house out there. And we stay out there on some weekends. My parents do. They have people from our church stay out there. And these folks didn't even know what land they were on. They just said it wasn't posted. And of course, one of the deer just happened to die, or at least according to them, really close to our fence line. And they said, well, we're pretty sure it was on the non-posted stuff. I mean, it was really close. We're pretty sure that's where it was. Sure, if any of you guys have land, I'm sure you've heard those stories before, but anyway, so really we wanted to buy this to kind of secure the west border of my dad's property. We've had multiple encounters over the years of people going back there, and again, they have every legal right to do it. The landowner doesn't post it. He's allowed me to post over the years, and I just don't do it every year on his behalf. But really, we just kind of want to do it for security purposes, and like Sam said, there really wouldn't be any way to get any building materials down there other than dropping it with a helicopter. I mean, it's just, you just can't get a truck down there even. You can barely get our four-wheeler back there. So that's kind of why we're hoping that we could, get this variance to keep it ag. There's no purpose for us to have it residential at this point.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there any public input? Any public input? Last time, any public input? Close the hearing. What are the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve, Tate. All my questions have been answered.
Okay, with staff comments?
Yes, please.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Was there any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Chris,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
Sherelle,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Tate.
Yes. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda this is actually the county-wide zoning map update. So I guess, Sam, is this you? And a lot of stuff?
I know. Okay, yeah, so this is the countywide zoning map update. If you all recall, or I'll just kind of run through a brief history of this since we have some new commission members too. So in 2015, the county adopted a new text zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations. With that, we went from zoning districts that were ag, residential, commercial, and industrial. So prior to 2015, we only had four different zoning districts. After this 2015 update to the ordinance, we got 11, I think. So we now have rural commercial, urban commercial, light industrial, heavy industrial. We have a lot more zoning districts to classify our properties into. However, in 2015, when we adopted the text ordinance, we didn't adopt a map to go along with it. So if you look at our zoning map, we have a mess. It is old commercial, old residential, so these zoning districts that existed kind of prior to this adoption, and then we have our new zoning districts, like sprinkled in there as well. So what we're proposing is we actually worked with Land Solutions, which is a private planning company, to kind of run through with us parcel by parcel to update all of these properties into the closest equivalent zoning district. So into one of those 11 different zoning districts. So that's what you have in front of you. We took it township by township to make it a little bit more digestible. But just for reference too, I mean, not every parcel is gonna fit perfectly into one of these zoning districts. We really tried our best. There's a few things I do kind of want to note as you're looking through this. So some really notable changes that you're gonna see. The minimum lot size for agricultural zoning districts is 40 acres. I can't remember what the minimum lot size was prior to 2015. 10. Okay, so it was 10. So everything that isn't 40 acres has now been rezoned, or is now being proposed to be rezoned to rural residential. It doesn't change their tax. It doesn't change their taxes at all because taxes are based off of the use, not the zoning district. So people can still farm on 20-acre parcels. It'll just be in that rural residential zoning district. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so that's existing small lot residential. So a lot of that you'll see is under an acre. It'll be like original town sites. We have up in Blacktail, a lot of those properties are under an acre. We labeled that existing small lot residential because we don't allow those kind of subdivisions anymore because Upper Missouri Health District doesn't allow you to have a septic tank if you don't have at least an acre. So I don't know. I just know we need to at least have an acre. That's what we've always been told by them. Mm-hmm. The book says 40,000, 1 acre is 43,560. And they say, well, you can do it above ground, a mound system. Okay, that's what it is, a drain field then. Yeah, they have to have a minimum of an acre for the drain field. Yeah. Yeah. Nope, it's all good. This is good to kind of talk it out. It's a lot to digest. Some other notable changes is property within the old commercial, so that prior to 2015 commercial designation, have typically been updated to either urban or rural commercial or a light industrial. A lot of the times commercial, what was considered commercial before 2015 was like pretty industrial type uses. So a lot of those uses, we looked back at the original decision letters and tried to fit the closest equivalent zoning district into those. Another thing, Sauk Valley Township withdrew from participation from the county zoning plan. I think you guys knew that. That happened a few years ago. So that's why you see Sauk Valley on the screen as that teal color. We don't do planning for them. We also don't do planning for a few different cities. And I have a list of those if you're curious too. But yeah, I mean, other than that, if you guys have any specific questions.
Can we go through the hearing first? Because I'm sure we're all gonna have a lot of questions, then we can close that, and then is that okay to do that? We do the hearing first before we start firing off questions? I'll open up the hearing. This is a public hearing. Is there any public input? Any public input? Last time, any public input? Close the hearing. Okay.
I do have a question. I noticed that on some of these, there's like rural residential and then it's got like CUP on them. What are those?
Yeah, so the maps that I had printed out, or that I had sent you guys, I included the conditional use permits just as an additional layer because I thought you might kind of be curious to see. A lot of the zone changes are accompanied with CUPs, and so it was just an additional layer. I could always take that off too.
No, I was just curious because I didn't know we'd done a lot of CUPs for residential.
Yeah, so home occupations are a big one.
Well,
And now-
and I imagine there's, some of them have an extra,
Or an
extra
additional
dwelling,
dwelling, totally, yep,
And
yep.
I had a question, in my little world, I guess, but Pleasant Valley in section 7, the southeast quarter, the whole quarter is public? Yeah, well, I mean, I know
think
there
that-
was, at one time there was a man cam, but that was up kind of in the northeast corner of that quarter, but I didn't realize that that whole quarter would be a public? It seems,
Which part are you in, Barry?
it's in section 7. Just right from North Highway 2 west of Highway 40. It seemed yeah, that was nice. To have a whole quarter, and not that it, I don't really care one way or another, it just kind of caught my attention, it's like, man, that's a.
No, and yeah, that's a good catch, Cameronheimer Development Services. That's a good catch. Those are things we're looking for. And that one, you're right. There was at one point, I can't even recall the name of it. I years ago dealt. Yeah, and I believe what Sam has pulled up here. There was a time early on during when things were in the 2010, 2011, 2012. Sometimes we would see rezones to public, not just as some man camps later on became commercial or even agricultural with a CUP. Sometimes they were actual rezones. And so this is an example of that was actually rezoned to public.
And you can see too, it was listed as the quarter, the entire quarter
Yeah.
section. Yeah. And so that was another thing too, that was a direction we got from the Board of County Commissioners was we really need to honor, even if nothing came to fruition, they never built out the RV park or whatever, they went through the zone change process and we have to honor that zone change. That was the direction we were given. Oh, it did?
Yeah. And to elaborate on what Sam said, that's what, if you recall when Sam Henderson was still with the county, he had also tried to do a zoning map update, and he was trying the best he could as well, but we found a lot of issues with, as Sam said, somebody came in, did the correct process of getting, let's say, an ag parcel converted over, or a zone change to industrial. They never did anything with it. Well, that was automatically going back to ag again, but they went through the process of changing that zoning, and so we had talked with numerous commissioners, and the thought process was it's not, I don't always like to use this word in planning, but not fair to take that zoning away, which I agree with. And so that's why we got help with Land Solutions to try to find this, and our goal was to not go stricter in zoning. So if someone was able to have a truck yard in their, at the time commercial, old commercial, well, we found a certain industrial parcel to be the correct way to do that because we weren't trying to make it stricter for them because they already did their due process. Yeah. Yep. And then you find out, yeah.
Yeah.
So that public parcel is an example of that. At one time, it was an RV park. It's no longer operational, but we didn't feel that we could take that zoning away and go back to something more restrictive. Yeah, ESR, the individual private lots are ESR.
Yeah.
That should have been updated to ESR as well, but it's over by Lund's Landing. Correct. Yeah, Keys Cove and Paradise Point, I believe all of those have been changed over to ESR.
Black Hill Township, all that, secure stuff on both sides of the road.
So that's lawn conquer. So that's gonna be a normal rural residential?
Yeah, so that is just dependent on lot size in there. So if the lots are bigger than an acre, we figured that they can continue to develop and they don't have to meet that. ESR, basically, the setback requirements for a lot within the ESR zoning district are very, very minimal because the lot sizes are super small. But when you have a acre to 5 acre parcel, we don't need to meet a 10-foot setback. We can give them, okay, now you can put your house 20 feet back from the section or from the property line.
Both, I believe.
Right on the section line. Right here. So everything's contained to this 1/4 section on secure.
Oh, okay.
Wisco was the north and south of Highway 2, and that's west of town. Mm-hmm.
Is there a secure on the east side of 85 too, that's, I don't know what it all is, thrown into a major, it's got pits and tanks and all that?
Just the one,
A little bit north and on the east side of their highway.
just a 13, right at 13 Mile?
13 mile, yeah, north of 13 and on the east side of the highway.
I think it's the one that shows the CUP right there, Sam. That I know is a secure location.
North of this.
Oh,
No, it's right in section 36.
that's their solid waste landfill.
Right above Tyrone, on Tyrone's back, where the block is. Right between the block and that.
Can you zoom out again so we can?
If you want to go to that same one we were just on, I think is the one Dan's referring to.
Wait, you're talking about the stuff on the east side.
East side of the highway. Oh, okay. As you make the curve.
Yeah, go back into 13 Mile again.
Right, yeah, okay, right behind them, there's a big disposal, okay, the big tanks and the pit and, I don't know what all these, big buildings there and stuff. So is that an industrial or what is?
Is that in this 13-mile?
Yeah, it's going to be that CUP part you see up. Yeah, that's going to be Secure's other location there.
Okay, so it probably would be that purple way back there.
Yeah, this is Marquee Alliance, so that was obtained by Secure.
Okay.
Yeah, so that'll be rezoned to light industrial with a CUP for an oil field treating facility.
That's a good, yeah, she's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so the only zoned properties here, Wisco, and then that new OE2 North facility.
Probably get that one added into the board packet. Yeah.
That's heavy industrial.
With a CUP.
Yeah, that's this guy.
We'll update the, yeah, we just, that's a good point. Yeah, and that could have been what happened. We'll make sure though, when it goes in front of the Board of County Commissioners, we'll get that included.
Go ahead, Dan had a couple questions too.
I have a question, what's the township then?
Okay.
One of, residents is looking at the map online, and their property is on the west end of Southeast subdivision. The zoning designation ER. I did not know what that meant.
ERS, or the
said that's in Southview? Southview, South. Yeah, right in there, right?
Yeah,
where-
ESR.
Right where you're,
Yep, so, yeah, ESR. So ESR is existing small lot residential, and, yeah, I know, right? You should have guessed. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. So this is for this is for subdivisions that were platted before 2015, but they're typically smaller than 1 acre. And because of the size of them, they need like special privileges, basically. So yep. Possibly.
They were, some of those were almost a townhouse. You'd go into the top story, and then the basement had separate living quarters, which weren't legal through zoning at the time, because I had received complaints years ago, and I think most of them had converted back to a single-family house, but they were trying to do multifamily housing in there at one point.
yeah, go ahead, yeah, go. Clarify the difference between rural and urban residential, just the lot size, or is there other differences?
Yes. I didn't include it in here, but so that was one of the things we worked through Solutions through. So there was multiple factors that went into that. So yes, lot size matters. So typically urban residential is between 1 and 5 acres, and then rural residential is 5 all the way up to 39, because once you get to 40, qualify for the agricultural zoning district. Also, proximity to urban areas or more densely populated areas of town, specifically those within, like, I think it was a mile away from another residential subdivision. So if you can connect to public or municipal services, you're most likely in the urban residential zoning district. If you can tap into public water, like public utilities, then we would consider that an urban residential. Typically, that's all of those factors. I think it was like 3 out of 5 of those factors had to play into getting an urban residential zoning designation. That always doesn't happen perfectly because we have subdivisions that were super dense. I'll show you some north of town.
Looking at that subdivision that's right to the northeast where Dan was just talking, where it's
Oh.
in there with urban and rural residential.
Yeah. So that one was a little difficult because some of those lots, so how we were doing it before was if someone was applying for a building permit and they were out of compliance with our current zoning district, we'd make them update the zoning district at that time. That was before we had established this like list of criteria where it smoothly fit into urban or smoothly fit into rural. So you'll see in some subdivisions that there's a mix now of urban and rural residential. It really doesn't matter for them. It just kind of, it becomes a pain more when they want to build and then their setbacks are different than their neighbors' setbacks. Yeah. And the designation. I remember they had an issue being called urban when it was, they classified it more as rural living. So, and really I wish we went away with some of those rural and urban because we're a generally rural county anyways. You're not getting urban living, but it is what it is. Missouri Ridge.
That's the one we just talked about. Dave Loynes had owned.
Oh,
Yeah, that's the one we talked about today.
yeah. So that went to urban, I believe. That's over here, right?
Yeah, just north of Love's. The bypass.
32 or 67, if that helps you out.
It'd be section 12 right there of,
My question
fair.
there, we've got public right in the middle of rural commercial.
I believe that's Fox Run RV Park. That's what that public zoning designation is.
That's Fox, yeah, okay, there's Fox, and go to section you talking about? 33? So I think
that might be in Tyrone, on the north side, so it might be Tyrone. Okay, so what would the public be in the middle of that?
What township and section?
I'm gonna go with Tyrone Township, is my guess, so that's right off of, right west of, Windsong. Section 33.
One of them's got a CUP attached to it.
And there's a CUP attached to that one.
That's Big Country RV Park.
Oh, yeah.
Those are all done in the crazy times. So
So is that,
spent a lot of time out there.
are we calling that urban commercial or rural commercial?
Rural.
Rural, okay. And then we have the public in the middle of that. What the heck is that? What did you say, it's an RV?
Yeah, Big Country RV Park.
It's still operating.
They still have people out there. Yeah.
I just see the tougher ones are when you get closer to the towns, like whether it's Ray, Tioga, Williston. You know, Williston, you got Williston Township, you got Missouri Ridge, Stony, or, well, Stony Creek too, I guess. Round Prairie. Sherelle, have you guys had a chance to look at some of this stuff up there?
Yeah, ours, mostly it looks okay, there's one, in Round Prairie Estates, there's a 10-acre lot in there that says it's commercial and it isn't. And I think it's an error because once upon a time, like 25 or 30 years ago, there was a guy in there that had a commercial operation, that was back when the township was doing the zoning. And when I came on the zoning board, I thought we had gotten it all corrected, that it was no longer,
This is Breen.
no, over there,
But yeah.
The pointers on the parcel.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm just trying to get my bearings.
Yeah, that's Breen.
Yeah, that would be, it used to be Brigham, used to be Stadtler, and now it's, Grayson Mill. Grayson Mill. I can't keep up.
Keep sliding further down.
Yeah. But anyway, that's an error. It should be rural residential like the rest of them. It's the back part of what was an 18-acre residential lot. That got sold, the guy sold it off because when he bought it, couldn't finance the 18 acres. So we bought the 10 acres from the guy, the original owner, so that we can, and it's my horse pasture, and it's not, it shouldn't be commercial. We need to correct that, but that's not a zoning issue, it's just an error, it's been hanging out there for a long time, and I thought it was corrected, and then it showed up on this.
Was in 23, is that public also there?
Which one?
In section 23 right
So this is kind of an interesting way that it shows up. No. So this like darker color was given in our internal system. It was either because it was granted a variance to remain ag that it was given this like separate zoning designation. So we're going to ask our GIS system to take out this darker color.
Actually, at one point, I think they didn't think that was public, it's where there's two TV towers on it.
Broadcasting, Prairie Public Broadcasting.
They sold, it was for sale, it belonged to that one television company, that order belongs to television.
Already on the south side.
Yeah, it belonged to one television company out of Minot or something.
Yeah. So it's ag. It's a different color than that public color, but.
For a while, it was showing up as public, and I thought it was because it had the colors on it.
Yeah, so to Sherelle's point, what our records found was that at some point, all three of these were zoned commercial. And these two with the houses on them were rezoned back to residential, and this one was kind of forgotten about, and so that's why we left it as commercial. So, yeah, if you make that request for a change, we'll get that updated before the Board of County Commission meeting.
Because it actually technically is a rural residential.
Okay. Any other questions? Go
Yeah,
ahead, Chris.
Wind energy towers must be CUP zoned. I was just looking at Lindahl Township. It's about more than half of its CUP. I was just wondering if that ties up any other land use when that many acres are designated CUP?
Nope, so that's kind of, I think, was the, and Cameron, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the original intent for the conditional use permit, is it doesn't change the uses allowed on that site. So all of those are still within the agricultural zoning district. They just have that extra layer of a conditional use permit for those. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's not like every individual tower. It's just each parcel that is part of that system has the conditional use permit overlaid on it. But yeah, it doesn't really restrict, other than following the regulations required by wind towers, it doesn't restrict the land use. But I know there's got to be some restrictions on what you can put near those.
There are certain setbacks and stuff that are set by not only the state. I don't quote me on this. Our regulations may have something in there, but the CUP district wouldn't change whatever those setbacks were. It doesn't make it any stricter, as Sam said. And the owners that agreed to these wind towers were certainly aware of the setbacks because it would restrict some of their building when they agreed to them.
Do you anticipate any concerns from rural residents with these automatic changes to rural residential on these plots?
Yes, just because I know that that's a scary thing to have your property go from agriculturally zoned to rural residential. Or your neighbors, yeah. But just, I guess, I want to say on the record, and we tell this to every person who comes in and asks about it, it doesn't change your taxing status. If you have a farm, if you have a house on a 100-acre parcel, it's still going to get taxed the same as if it's now within the rural residential zoning district. So it's mainly just for, yeah. Oh, the uses are exactly the same, other than in an agriculturally zoned property. I think there's one thing that might be different. From just like off the top of my head, there really are not very many differences between ag and rural residential. If anything, you could do more in rural residential, I believe, in terms of like your conditional uses. Like you can have shops more, like commercial shops, furniture shops, massage therapy offices, etc. Like you wouldn't really be able to have that in agricultural. Another thing that you can have in agricultural that you couldn't have in rural residential is like mineral extraction. But if you're getting rezoned to rural residential, you're going to be under 40 acres, and mineral extraction typically doesn't happen on properties that are less than, like, that are smaller than 40 acres. So
She's referring to like gravel pits. We don't control any oil extraction.
Yeah, sorry, like scoria and whatnot.
I guess one of my concerns is, as we've seen in the last several hearings, when one neighbor wishes to convert a property to rural residential and somebody else has an old farmstead on an agricultural property nearby, there is some concern with growing a population in these rural areas. And now automatically converting it to rural residential, it looks like said neighbor who has that happen could just build on that without going through a process to have a hearing. And am I misunderstanding that?
So the process, so if you are going from okay, let's like take an example. I'm a visual person, so on the screen, some of these parcels right here were in the agricultural zoning district. but they are too small to fit into that zoning district now. So we converted them to rural residential. So now, say I own this piece of property right now. So if I can go in to if I decide I want to place a house out on this property, I can go into the building department and I'm already zoned properly for a house. If this were to remain in the agricultural zoning district, it's under 40 acres. Now I'm non-conforming. So especially in terms of like bank lending, if your property is non-conforming with zoning code, that can be an issue in getting a mortgage or getting a loan. So that was our reasoning behind this. It doesn't give them any more right to put 5 homes on there. They still get 1 home, just in the same way an ag property. Well, now ag can get 2, but it's because of the acreage size. So it doesn't really like start the process of subdividing any quicker.
So that gets back to what we were talking about earlier. Would it make people's lives simpler if if it's under 40, what if we used a 20-acre mark? Would that make things easier for staff? Because
I guess I'll add that we certainly as staff are open to whatever the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners recommends. I will say that at the time that these ordinances were updated in 2015, that was a lot of back and forth on the minimum acreage for ag districts. And that was probably the biggest holdup of adopting a new ordinance. And I don't think all the commissioners on both boards agreed, but the majority said we're going to go with the 40. And that was quite a bit, it took quite a while to do that. And typically, as Sam had said, the map should have been done at the same time, but they weren't. And so now we're just trying to make the maps align with what we already adopted back in 2015. Well, again, certainly we take the direction of both boards, whatever the boards feel are appropriate. But I understand what you're saying. I think, unless Sam, if you disagree, that right now what we have set up is geared towards that 40 acreage minimum, especially because if you recall, we just had an ordinance approved for allowing 2 homes in an agricultural district, which is a minimum of 40 acres without any CUP. Well, if we wind up changing down to 20, then we're having people build 2 homes in 20 acres. That's still a lot of room, but it's going to change a lot of the thought process and the approvals that happened in the past. And we would have to readopt the ordinance probably or do some major adjustments. And we are certainly, I don't know if you have any comments to add, if you think that's appropriate or what you think, Sam, the direction on minimum ag acreage.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Like our ordinance is geared to deal with 40-acre properties being the minimum with ag. I think 20 acres is large. Like we had this conversation, 20 acres does seem like it could fit into the agricultural zoning district. But yeah, since that's a good point that we just changed it to have 2 acres. So now you have 2 homes, 1 home on 10 acres, the other home on the other 10 acres. 10 acres really isn't that big when you're out in the middle of the country here. Yeah.
But also to maybe elaborate a little further, Adam, on what you had mentioned and what Sam had already kind of explained, that whether it's agricultural or rural residential, they would still need to apply for a building permit for a home. It wouldn't change that. If somebody with a rural residential property wanted to build a strict ag shop for their tractors and things, they wouldn't need a permit. It wouldn't change that just because the zoning district changed. So they still have pretty much every ability to work that property. It's actually a little probably less restrictive. That was our goal, is to not make these properties more restrictive. And if we do run into the rare instance where this could happen, where somebody says, hey, it got more restrictive and it was either an error or an oversight, then I have the ability to waive any zone change fees. I'm not going to charge somebody if it was something staff did and when they come to the process. So we certainly are open to that, because we're never going to get it perfect. We're trying. That's why we hired Land Solutions LLC, is to try to help us as well. And this is, I think, our second or third go around on the map update. And it's difficult. It's hard change, and trying to just have the language match the maps is just not an easy thing, but I think this is probably the best attempt we've had so far.
And the further we get away from 2015, the further complicated the map gets
As in another
because use
5-10 years, we'll need another ordinance
Yeah.
update. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Sam should have that. You're right, yeah. Yeah, I-
From ag to rural residential, oh yeah, a lot, thousands.
But I'd say 99% of the people that are concerned about that, their concerns are usually taken care of when they realize that their taxing is not going to change. A lot of people see that and think they're going to. Oh, yeah. And we've already taken a lot of those calls and emails, but that's usually the biggest concern we get is they're worried about their taxes.
And I think the more worrisome thing we have right now without having adopted this new one is we have a lot of properties that are out in the county right now given an old zoning designation, and we have realtors and just regular property owners going to our maps and giving, unbeknownst to them, they didn't know, but they're not contacting us and they're just looking at the zoning map and giving like wrong information to these poor property owners who are buying these properties. And so that's kind of why we're like, okay, we have to push this through now. Right.
And it can be difficult as well and when banks call us and ask if a property is in zoning compliance. Well, technically they are, but they're not because they're not in compliance, not the property owner's fault, but with our maps versus our current ordinance. And some banks are a little hesitant
Totally.
with that. And so we find that difficult as well. And then you'll see a lot of these staff-initiated zone changes, and that's us piecemealing everything together, and we're just trying to do it all at once.
Yeah, and we give that we say legally non-conforming, and that's kind of what we have to say to people is you're okay, but you're non-conforming. And like Cameron said, some of those banks don't like that, so.
Question now, right on the north side of Blacktail, a young fella's plopping a house and a big shop and all that down. Now, does that get put on a zoning map? Or does that just stay in an ag district? Or what happens when that type of stuff happens?
Well, the acreage for the home would depend on what the zoning, how it stays. If it's 40 acres or larger, it would stay ag. Now, if the shop he's building, if he pulled a building permit, if it's listed as a commercial or industrial use, then it would typically have to go through a rezone or a CUP process depending on the use. Now, if the shop is going to be storing his farm tractors and whatnot, he doesn't need a permit. And
I'm guessing he put it down as ag because he's a farmer, so that won't even show up on the map then is what I'm saying.
correct, yeah, it would stay, as long as it was at 40 acres or larger, it would stay as ag. And even if there's a home on the parcel, it would still stay as ag as long as it was within that 40 acre minimum.
Well,
Strictly agricultural purposes.
and farm homes aren't going to show up because we don't change zoning for them. I mean, farmsteads
Correct.
sitting out on 160 acres or more, they aren't going to
They still
show up
would
and
be
nothing
ag.
changes for them.
Nothing.
Okay, any other questions?
One more, what does the process look like just with a change this size all at once? And I'm sure you guys have done a thorough job, but there'll probably be a number of issues that arise. And I understand, I think we're in the public comment period right now, but not everybody's looking at it. If you get a deluge of phone calls the first month after this goes into effect, is there a expedited process to get this straightened out? Will it come back to us? Do we have to evaluate each one individually?
How did the city handle those ETJ phone calls when? Yeah, typically we would take them on a case by case. No, if it is, like I said, if something went to a rezone, but it was rezoned more restrictive in this update, and it was an oversight by us or the Land Solutions, I would waive any fees. That property owner didn't do this on, it was no fault of their own, so I would waive any fees and we'd put it through as a staff-initiated zone change if that were the case. If we found that something got rezoned or a use was not correct in the zoning district, then they would have the right to seek a variance in front of both boards. So there is certainly a process. No one's ever at a dead end. We always try to offer options, although sometimes if it's no fault of their own, there's certainly options. Sometimes the options are difficult if, there are compliance issues caused by the owner. But in these situations. We certainly have avenues that they can take to try to correct any mistakes that were made.
And this isn't our first attempt at this. We actually made an attempt a year ago, and that's exactly what happened. After we pushed it through, there was a lot of issues with it that came to the surface, luckily closely after we adopted it, and so we just repealed it and basically started over again. Hopefully we don't have to do that this time, because we did hire Land Solutions this go. And we have justification for each parcel. So now, after going through all of them again, we gave a reasoning behind why we're proposing this change.
And just for the record, because when I seek third-party help, it comes out of my department's budget. I would like to add too that was one of the benefits of the temporary housing fees. We helped pay for this Land Solutions a couple of times actually throughout the years, but the money that we had put towards paying them came out of the temporary housing fee budget. So that's just a.
So I've been working with Joel Nelson, and then David DeGrand-Prix is the president, I believe, of Land Solutions.
They're out of western Montana. I can't think of the name of it. Yeah, they were here. 2013 probably. Yeah. Yeah, correct. They started some of that initial stuff under Ray Pacheco at the time. He had hired him.
Okay. So what, I guess that was the deal. So we need to vote on this with the recommendation, the A or nay.
And I would recommend if Sherelle said that one was incorrect to add that in the motion so we can change it for the board when it goes in front of them. Or any other parcels that you may see that could be incorrect.
So what are the wishes?
I would just read the parcel ID number. As simple as that.
For Sherelle's. Was there one more though that we talked about that needed to be changed? I know yours it was already an RV park.
Yeah. And that was, I was just curious as I didn't realize there was a whole order of things there.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve it with.
With, the correction would be that parcel number 59-154-03-00-010-RC is by mistake on this map shown as commercial. It should be rural residential.
That was Dan's motion. Sherelle, do we always miss it? You'll second that?
I'll second that motion.
All right, anybody have any other questions? Are we still live back there?
Yeah, we're good.
Roll call, please.
Barry,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
Dan, Sherelle,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Tate.
Yes, motion carries. We have, next meeting is November 18th,
Oh, sorry.
and then we do, I'm sorry.
I have one last thing. I don't think it made it onto, it was a last minute change. I was just wondering, can I add an item really quick? Okay, so the 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission calendar, you should have a paper copy of that. I just thought we could get it out of the way at this meeting. There are no conflicts, for like federal holiday conflicts, but. Third Thursday, correct.
So,
Motion to approve.
is there a
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, both on both sides of the road.
They've sold it. They just sold.
So that'll be taken out?
We just had a meeting on this with Karen actually.
Yeah.
So it's just Target's under a CUP?
Can you, I focus more on Capitol, just south of Capitol Lodge, between Tioga and Ray. That's the one they were kind of pulling apart slowly, but
Yes, that's the one.
yeah, it's west. It should be West Bank. Yeah, right in there. Yeah, that's the zoning's not correct on this map though, because they had that rezoned.
So to answer Dan's question.
So that's one's gotta get
is, yeah, is there a
adjusted.
timeframe where they had to get that stuff out?
We were looking into the bonds. I would have to look at, I don't know off the top of my head, I'd have to look at targets. If they even, some of those older or man camps, bonds were never, they may have been asked for. If they were asked for, they weren't always followed through or even obtained by the county. Yeah, their CUP is expired. Yeah. And I don't believe, did they pay bed fees on that one, Rachel? Yeah, they've stopped bed fees and all, so we're not charging them, they can't operate either, but I'm not sure the status of their cleanup bond, if one exists, and one that, typically what I find with cleanup bonds on these old camps is they have to by law notify us, the bond company, if they're gonna let that lapse or whatnot. And then if we find that they have not complied, if there was a bond requirement, then we don't release those bonds. And they're usually pretty good about calling us, wanting their bond back, because it's not a cheap thing to keep open. And so I haven't received a call from Target for that specific camp, but I'm not saying there is a bond. But usually they would be calling if there was an open bond. Yeah, we, it should show on the map already. There's Capital Gains LLC. Somebody had created an LLC for it. And I believe you'd spoke with them, Sam. What did they say their intentions were? I can't recall.
Just to, like, heavy industrial uses, so like a lay-down yard and then possibly shop. I can't remember. It was industrial use.
So what are they gonna do? Originally, they were supposed to clean the place, when they were done, they were supposed to clean it up, right? So if they sell it to this new person, do they have to go in and pull all the electrical and all the meter posts and all that stuff out first? Because it's a bit of a eyesore.
I'll let you, if you want to talk on that, Sam, on what Karen kind of explained to us. And, yeah. Because I can't remember.
So is that something you can maybe look into?
So we did have a meeting with Karen about this too, because that was our concern was they just sold the property. There wasn't a lien on the property, so it was clear to go to the next person. And Wayne, our county engineer, went out there to look at the existing utilities. And basically the determination that was made was as long as the utilities are not being used for residential services, they can continue to exist, and the property is back to industrial, like, standard level. Because we didn't put a reclamation bond or anything like that, and we didn't tie it to that original developer, we have no leverage. They went and sold the property, and then we're not gonna slap this new owner with the requirements to decommission. I mean, it is pretty much decommissioned back to industrial.
It is. They do have a lot of garbage out there still, the utilities. But as Sam was saying, this one was unique because it was an industrial zone property. It wasn't like some of the other man camps that are on ag property with CUPs. In fact, one of the concerns when Capitol Lodge owned it, when they were looking at the time to convert it over to a hotel wedding venue, they had a national chain that was interested in purchasing it. It was ultimately denied by the Board of County Commissioners. But a few of the comments by the commissioners at that time were should it go to this, or if it goes back to industrial, then it can be an eyesore off the highway. And it ultimately was denied. I don't know if that was the right use. That's really wasn't my decision, but it is industrial, so we don't have property maintenance codes that deal with trash, garbage, or rubbish in the county. Those are usually more appropriate for cities. So we don't have a lot of leverage as far as saying they need to clean it up or make it look better. And its zoning is industrial. So it's not like some of the ag ones.
I would look into the other man camps. I would suspect whether we collected the bond or not, I don't know.
There certainly are a handful with bonds.
With bonds and whatnot in place, or the irrevocable letter credits, whatever have you, whether they were ever taken in, I get things were pretty out of control.
Yeah, most, I think we only have, 4 or 5 active camps now left. A lot of, I have released, and probably my time as director at the county, I'd say 5 or 6 bonds for different camps. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but we had 2 this morning that were requesting old letters from 17 and 18, and they were the MDU and Knife River Man Camp on the West Bypass. That's one where they reclaimed everything, and I did release their bonds years ago. So there certainly, we have found that, we'll look into it though, I guess. But most of them will be calling us if they have an open bond and they don't have an operational camp. because
Do
they don't
you
wanna
know
pay for
what
that.
the plans are for the Target man camp out in Round Prairie? I mean, they haven't done anything with it,
They
and
paid, they just, yeah.
I don't, it doesn't look like anybody's using it.
Well,
So we went out for a site visit a few months ago, or actually in the winter. But they are not full, but they still want to keep their active conditional use permit or temporary housing permit status. So they keep paying for that fee.
I think it's
500
500.
per bed,
And
and the
s-
minimum of
50 beds, I believe.
Yeah.
And so since we had updated to that minimum of 50 beds, as Sam was saying, like Target out there near your place, they may not be filling up all 50 beds, but if they were to pay, couldn't accept a payment less than what 50 beds would be, then they lose their CUP. So they keep paying that even though they're not filling the beds because they don't want to lose that.
I didn't think they had anybody there. I haven't seen any vehicles there for months and months.
And as of late, that may be the case. We haven't done a
Yeah.
fire inspection since.
It's been a long time since I actually don't think they're using it. I mean, they may be, but it's well maintained. I mean, it's not.
I guess all we're able to do as staff is check that they have the beds there, whether they're occupied or not. We really can't check that, and they're paying for those beds, and they have been paying for the minimum.
actually we went out there early this summer in June.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And they, at the time, they didn't have anyone really around except a few staff members just doing regular maintenance. So,
I think that's how Target went too. I forget the total number of beds they had to begin with in the the boom days. Then it started slowing down, so they cut back on the bed numbers. They could cut back, but once they cut back, if you went from 1,000 to 750, you couldn't just jump back up to 1,000 later on.
I believe you're correct. Yeah, and that's something that they had done. Yeah.
But I wonder, like even like that Target in Capitol over there, could talk to somebody from the weed board, maybe, if it's getting to be overgrown or something, they don't want to take care of it, I guess the weed board can, and you can just assess it back to them, I suppose. Cause it looks like hell actually, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the weed board's powers are. I'm not positive what they're able to do. Good. Okay. Yeah.
You good, Sam? Thank you.